Welcome, everybody, to this brand new podcast called Combo Sports Talk. This is the first episode ever of this show. This show, Combo Sports Talk, is co-hosted by Shawn Davisson and Dustin Tran. The guy that is speaking right now is Dustin Tran. Before you do anything else, though, please subscribe to this YouTube channel called Combo Sports Talk. There will also be the podcast version of this as well on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It focuses on debate, discussion, and comedy opinions that are based around football and basketball mostly. Trust us, it will be worth your time to keep up with Combo Sports Talk. Shawn, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, man. I agree with everything you say. Definitely two passionate sports fans, and we're ready to talk. We have a lot to bring to the table. You don't want to miss our topics, our discussions, our hot takes, our debates, all of that. You can find it here.
Yep, and I certainly agree with you. That was a great point that you made. So now we are ready to get Combo Sports Talk officially started up. So what is going to be the opening topic? All right, so we got an interesting opening topic. It is going to be about Giannis's knee injury. So in Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals, Giannis Antetokounmpo hyperextended his knee. This happened with just over 7 minutes remaining in the third quarter. Giannis got injured because he had jumped up the contested alley-oop from John Collins to Clint Capella. According to Adrian Wojnarowski and Zach Lowe, there was no structural damage to Giannis's left knee. There was an MRI taken, which showed that the ligament in Giannis's knee is fine. However, Giannis's timetable for his return is unclear according to ESPN. Right now, he is listed as doubtful for Game 5 in Milwaukee tonight. So this now leads me to ask this topic question. What is your reaction to Giannis Antetokounmpo getting injured?
It's huge. We saw what happened after he went out of the game. Last game, Hawks were up 10. He goes out and it ends up, what was it, like 120 to 88 as a final score? It wasn't close. like Giannis went out and it was game over. And they had no Trae Young that game. And Clint Capella is going to be questionable as well as Trae Young tonight. So there's some big-time injuries in this series. So whose roster do you like better? Kind of when the big guys go down, the Hawks or the Bucks. Giannis being out, I think, impacts the Bucks more than Trae Young being out for the Hawks. And it could, you could argue the Bucks have the better roster, but what makes the Bucks so good is the shooters around Giannis. No Giannis, no Bucks in the finals.
Yep, and although I don't necessarily agree with what you just said, that final part, I do agree that the Hawks roster is deeper than the Bucks roster. Giannis has carried his team more than Trae Young has. This is not a diss on Trae Young. This is just how I feel about the Hawks roster. Right now, Nate McMillan, he's done a great job with the Hawks. But back to Giannis. Obviously, hyperextended his knee. Do not know when he will return. That is unclear. I believe that he will end up missing Game 5. I believe that he will end up returning in Game 6. If the Bucks do not win in Game 5 in Milwaukee, he'll try to go. He won't be 100% healthy, and he'll just try to wing it out.
Oh, yeah. Giannis is going to do everything he can to put the team on his back. And if that means coming back a little earlier than he should, he's going to do it. Because if it comes down to where they go down 3-2 or maybe they win this and they lose the next and it's Game 7, Giannis will play. If it's a big time game, he's not going to let Milwaukee fall because of him.
And remember, Giannis is one of the most loyal players in the NBA, even more so than somebody like a Damian Lillard. Giannis Antetokounmpo actually signed a supermax max extension before he entered the free agency. So that shows you how much he was willing to stay in Milwaukee. So to me, that's just wild to think about. And the way that he will grind out, I believe that he will be back before the injury will really get worse. He'll try to go back if he can. If he's 50% ready to go, he will be back. But this brings up a bigger problem in the NBA. Obviously, we got a lot of injuries going on in the NBA playoffs. That has been the theme. So what do you think about that?
LeBron's been the biggest advocate for this. They should have had a longer off season. They should have taken more time to rest. LeBron just came off a finals run against the Heat, and the playoff teams didn't have time to rest. And they go to the playoffs then, and then they go to the playoffs now. It's, obviously not exactly the same playoff teams, but the top heavy teams are still up there. And you can tell they're fatigued, they're getting injured. It was a little bit unsafe of the NBA to kind of go that early.
Yeah, I know that it was unsafe for the NBA to go early at that time, but at the end of the day, it's a money business operation. They got to do what it takes to make the money. I don't mind that the NBA started up the way that they did early. Having said that, yeah, you can see that these superstar players, their injuries is starting to catch up to them. And that's why a team like the Suns are going to the finals. We're going to get to them a little bit later, but they didn't make the NBA playoffs in the bubble. So they've actually had more offseason time compared to some of these other teams. The same thing with the Hawks. They didn't even, I don't even think they played in the bubble either as well. So they've had plenty of time to get things rolling.
Yeah, I mean, the Suns might have benefited most from being in Orlando last year. Other than the Lakers who won a championship, the Suns, they went 8-0 in their run, still didn't make playoffs, but they had time to figure out, this is our team, this is what we want, and let's just add a Chris Paul to this team. And you know what? They're on their way to a finals.
For sure, for sure. And like I said, we will discuss about the Suns later on here, but back to Giannis. Yeah, so even though Giannis is getting hurt, this really presents a bigger picture of the issues that are going on in the NBA. So here are the key players that were injured and had to miss time in the NBA playoffs. Mike Conley for the Jazz, Donovan Mitchell for the Jazz, Chris Paul for the Suns due to COVID-19, Jamal Murray for the Nuggets, Kawhi Leonard for the Clippers, Anthony Davis for the Lakers, Joel Embiid for the 76ers. He was playing injured throughout the Hawks series. Kyrie Irving for the Nets, James Harden for the Nets. He was playing injured as well most of that series. And now Giannis, obviously. And then you look at Trae Young. He's currently injured right now as well. And then you got Jaylen Brown and Kemba Walker from the Celtics. So those were just 13 names I just gave you. Those are 13 star players that were injured during these playoffs. So that is a long list of star players that are out.
Yeah, Giannis just another name on the list now. Before it'd be, oh, Kevin Durant tore his Achilles, playoffs over, like for the Warriors losing the series, that kind of thing. Now it's, oh, everyone's getting injured. Everyone's, having their playoff team affected. So it almost feels like it's evening out, which is like not a good thing at all. The NBA, you said it's a business, but they also make their money by their top players, and their top players aren't remaining healthy.
And I agree with you about that as well. But you also have to look at this from a different perspective. Look at Middle America, teams that root for smaller market teams, they're having a lot of fun time. That's why ratings have actually gone up in these NBA playoffs, despite what people are telling you. Look at the data, they've increased by 39%, according to the Herd from Colin Cowherd, because Middle America has become more interested in watching these NBA playoffs because, in a way, this tests out how well did the team roster construction was by the way that they built depth, and it tests out the role players, and it gives role players a chance to step up under pressure, which in the long term, it could create more stars because role players could be getting elevated up there. So we also have to look at it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying. And the playoffs are time for those role players to get their spotlight. Before last year, they didn't win it, but it was Tyler Hero and a few Suns role players elevating to get the champion or get to the championship. Before that, it was, Fred VanVleet, rising to the occasion, winning the Raptors a championship, playing awesome defense. The playoffs is where role players need to shine, and it ends up getting them bigger money as well. And it does happen. But I still say you want your star players, you want your superstar players, you want your brand players to be playing in the playoffs.
Yeah, that is tough. That is tough for the NBA, especially with the jerseys that are being sold, the superstar players. Like a lot of these superstar players that fans buy jerseys, they are not playing in the NBA playoffs right now. The NBA, that's not good business for them in that regard. So their merchandise hits are going down.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's probably Zion Williamson jerseys selling out everywhere, and he's not in the playoffs. And I just exactly what you said. It's their big time jersey sales. LeBron, Anthony Davis, You're just not in the playoffs.
Now this leads me to ask this question as well. With Giannis's injury, how does this affect Coach Budenholzer's job security with the Bucks?
The biggest question was, can he get to the finals? Can Budenholzer get to the finals? He just took down the Nets team that no one thought would be going down. You know, it was a lot of people's conference or NBA championship predictions. Lots of people's predictions come out of the East. The Nets were the team to beat. The Nets had an insane amount of talent. Budenholzer beat them. He's shown he can play against or coach against big time teams. It was an awesome series. Went to 7 games. Bucks squeaked by, but they won and they got by. If he doesn't make it to the finals, I don't think he's losing his job like people were calling for it the year before. But Giannis's injury could definitely put him on the hot seat.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Coach Bud Budenholzer. He gets way too much hate, in my opinion. You have to remember that the Bucks were not a good franchise. Everybody talks like the Bucks are like a tier 1, tier 2 franchise. Before Giannis and before Coach Bud got in there, the Bucks were not that good of a team. They were just first round exit teams. They were basically a touch above the Hornets in terms of their franchise history. They are not a team that, you know, is really good in these playoffs consistently before those two. And you look at how Coach Bud, 2-time Coach of the Year, he's taken Giannis Antetokounmpo into a superstar player because Giannis was not a superstar before Coach Budenholzer was there. So he's developed Giannis into a 2-time MVP winner. He's also made the Bucks role players better. He's putting them in position to succeed. His offensive schemes are actually really good, the way that they put guys in position to succeed. It's just that I think people are just grasping about how Coach Bud hasn't been to the finals yet, and he seems like he's lasted quite a while in the NBA, and he hasn't taken a team to the finals. And for a 2-time Coach of the Year, they feel like he probably should have taken them there, especially with the superstar talent like Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yes, but how they've built the roster, like they've done great roster management, built a great team around Giannis. I think Bud's doing really good. He got Drew Holiday this year. And you know, Chris Middleton's still there. So they have talent around Giannis and they should be able to make it to the finals. But even if they don't, you know how hard it is to maintain this consistency of being great in the regular season and then go into the playoffs and they're performing now. That takes a lot. And if you fire your coach, you're either hoping to win the finals or maybe they crash and burn. You know, but I'd say keep the consistency going. 1 year, you're going to break through.
I agree for sure. And plus, this guy took down the Nets. He outcoached Steve Nash, and the Nets had an insane amount of talent. So I think Coach Bud's a good coach. If he gets fired, I don't think that would be the right decision for the Bucks. If they don't make the finals this year, it'll be because of injuries, not because of his inability to coach.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fans will be calling for his head if he doesn't make the finals. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what should happen, but it might be what puts him on the hot seat, the fans.
All right, so this will just wrap it up with this one final question. You just tell me if the Bucks are going to win this series in how many games.
I've had it since the beginning of the series. I had Hawks and Suns in the finals. I'm going to stick with what I said. And I think Hawks win in 7.
All right, and I see where you're coming from, but I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to say Bucks in 7, but it could go either way. It just depends on when Giannis comes back from his injuries.
I agree, and it also depends on if Trae Young plays tonight. Trae Young's a big factor tonight. If Trae Young plays tonight and Giannis doesn't, that could be very big for the Hawks.
I agree with you, definitely, for sure. All right, so that wraps up the Giannis Antetokounmpo topic. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is about Chris Paul. It will be about his first NBA Finals appearance. So the Suns are going back to the NBA Finals for the first time since 1993. That was 28 years ago, which means it was a really long time ago since the Suns were in the NBA Finals. The Suns had not made the NBA playoffs since 2010. So for them to make the NBA Finals was surprising, to say the least. In the offseason, the Suns aggressively traded for Chris Paul, and it has paid dividends. He has balled out for the Suns, and he has made teammates better. DeAndre Ayton has become one of the most underrated centers in all of basketball, with Chris Paul feeding him the basketball. Devin Booker has taken his game to new heights. A lot has happened for the Suns team. However, this topic will be looked at from the Chris Paul perspective, as he has been an excellent leader for the Suns. Reactions will be given now to Chris Paul reaching his first NBA Finals. There are plenty of options to choose from. With that being said, that now leads me to ask this topic question. What are your thoughts on Chris Paul reaching his first NBA Finals appearance?
Man, it's awesome. Chris Paul deserves to play in the finals in his career. He deserves to win a finals. I think he will win the finals. That's my prediction right here. Chris Paul gave this team really what they needed. They had Ricky Rubio last year, who was really their point guard. Getting Chris Paul over Ricky Rubio elevates you in every single category. And there's a lot of slander on Chris Paul's name kind of going into that game. And Chris Paul, he put on a show, 40 some points, 3 steals, 8 assists. That's what you want to see from your point guard. And he's brought this team to new heights, like I said. And when they beat the Lakers, it was, oh, the Lakers aren't good. No, it's the Suns. The Suns are a great team.
Yeah, so my reaction to Chris Paul reaching the NBA Finals, I feel great for CP3, man. And this guy, I want to make this clear. This guy is actually insanely underrated. When you talk about Chris Paul, when we talk about the great point guards in today's NBA, we think of Steph Curry, we think of Damian Lillard, we think of Russell Westbrook, but Chris Paul's name rarely ever comes up in today's NBA. And that's really a darn shame. Yeah, I know that he doesn't have the numbers to back up that he is a great point guard, but when you watch him play, when you actually look at the film, you can see the impact that he has on winning. And it goes back to every team that he goes in. You look at the New Orleans Hornets, now Pelicans, he took them to game 7 in the second round, and the Pelicans have never been in that stage without him, still haven't to this day. And then you look at the Clippers. Yeah, I know the Clippers just reached the Western Conference Finals this year, but we're talking about the Clippers of back then. They were a horrible franchise. He elevated that franchise as far as I'm concerned. And then you go to the Rockets. He goes to the Rockets. I mean, he takes them to the Western Conference Finals. He played a big part of it. And then he goes to the Thunder. We just saw that they finished 14th in the Western Conference this year. When this man was here, he was the 5th seeded team in the Western Conference, took the Rockets to 7 games with a team that was not even on par with the Rockets roster. When you look at their talent, top to bottom, and then you look at this year, the Suns, they hadn't made the playoffs for over a decade. Now he takes them to the NBA Finals. So you look at the impact that Chris Paul has had at winning. This guy is actually underrated when we actually think about him.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul took that Thunder team, who was supposed to be the worst in the NBA, to a 5th seed in a game 7 against the Rockets. That's insane to me. Chris Paul, people say this about a lot of players. It should really be said about Chris Paul. He makes everyone around him better. Anyone who plays with Chris Paul ends up playing better. DeAndre Ayton's game has increased a lot. A lot of the load has come off Devin Booker and other players on the Suns. The role players he's been able to get them open shots. Chris Paul makes everyone around him better.
For sure. Chris Paul, the way that he can pass the ball, the way he can play defense, the way he can set up offensive plays. This guy plays as one of the smartest basketball players ever. When you look at his basketball IQ, it is on the level of somebody like a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan, in a way, in terms of how he can get his guys set up and how he can get them open looks and how he himself can even take over games if necessary, but he won't force the issue if unnecessary to do so.
He just sees the floor differently from the other players. He knows what defenders are going to do, how they're going to react. And not only is he an amazing player on the offensive side, being able to seek out players and he avoids turnovers, very crucial. He avoids turnovers. But on the defensive side, he's an elite defender, and people don't talk about that side of him anymore. He's still a great defender. And I know you said we should talk about him, about the great point guards today. I think we should talk about him as one of the better point guards all time.
And I agree with you with that as well. Chris Paul, the way that, like I said, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record saying this, but I'm just amazed with the way that he can set up the floor and set up the plays. And also, I want to talk about his defense as well, the way he steals the basketball, the way that he's tenacious on the defensive side of the ball. We list out all these superstar point guards, and most of them do not play defense at all. All right. Even my favorite player, Steph Curry, he tries to play defense, but he's just not where he needs to be defensively. That's all right though, but that's another story for another day. Then you look at somebody like Damian Lillard, liability on the defensive end. Russell Westbrook, he's a liability when we're talking about individual defense, not rebounding, but he's a liability in there as well. And then you think about somebody like a Kyrie Irving, James Harden, they don't play defense for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul plays on both ends of the floor. And I don't know what was said or anything, but I know Patrick Beverley was real upset about getting torn up. And Patrick Beverley, you saw it, he went behind him and just shoved him. Chris Paul he made Patrick Beverley upset, and he made him, he made sure Patrick Beverley, one of the biggest trash talkers, knew you're out of here. Like, Chris Paul was able to put that down, and he was definitely frustrating Patrick Beverley, who's people would consider a really good defender. He put him out. And then he also was probably locking up Patrick Beverley too.
And also remember this as well. So you brought up that he elevated DeAndre Ayton's game, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I actually agree with that a lot. DeAndre Ayton is actually, I'm going to say this right now on a limb, he's the most underrated center in the NBA right now. He's the most underrated player. The way that this man gets rebounds, the way that this guy can get open in the post, and how Chris Paul can feed it to him, and the way that he just bails him out in pick and roll.
And I know what you're saying. And everyone saw this in DeAndre Ayton when he was going to be drafted. I don't think Chris Paul made DeAndre Ayton. I think Chris Paul elevated DeAndre Ayton. And I think DeAndre Ayton will be better the rest of his career because he's had a guy like Chris Paul to be able to give him the ball and get him open and things like that. I think Chris Paul, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, will have made DeAndre Ayton's career better.
I agree with you for sure. All right. And you look at DeAndre Ayton, how he was criticized for not living up to somebody like a Luka Doncic. But hey, now he's been to the NBA Finals, and Luka hasn't advanced past the first round yet. So that's something DeAndre Ayton can hang his hat over. So I feel proud of him for that.
Yeah, and obviously missing on Luka hurts a lot. But I think the Suns are fine with, and I don't think they're upset at all that they have a guy like DeAndre Ayton, because when you have a big man who can stretch it a little bit as well and shoot a little bit and then play great defense and, just run the pick and roll, I think that's big time. I think that's big when you're looking for a championship team.
I like Ayton. He's a championship type of player. And honestly, he probably, in my opinion, should have been the second best player in that draft behind only Luka. All right, so to wrap this up, I got to ask you this. All right, so where do you have Chris Paul ranked all time? And if he wins the championship, where do you have him ranked? And how much does this impact him?
Chris Paul ranked all time among all players or point guards?
Point guards.
Oof, that's tough. I think Magic Johnson's over him for sure, and Steph Curry is over him for sure. But if he wins this finals, he has a great slot to be in that top 5 point guard all time discussion. I think if he wins the finals, he has a case for a top 5 point guard of all time.
All right, so this is kind of my deal with Chris Paul. So right now, I see him as a top 7 point guard of all time. But if he wins a championship, like right here, right now, he's definitely top 5, no question about it. But moving him higher than 5th, that's just going to be too hard for him to do. And that's not a knock against Chris Paul. That's just how I value the other great players that are there. So this finals ring that for Chris Paul, this is pretty important for his legacy.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul is playing that floor general position, and he has the nickname Point God because he does what you need from a point guard. He can score when you need him to, but most importantly, plays defense, avoids turnovers, and gets players the ball. He gets them to score. When you take that as what you value in a point guard, he fits up there as a top 5 all time.
I agree with that. All right, so now that we have wrapped up the Chris Paul topic, I want to move over to a segment called Hot Take segment. It's NBA only. All right, so Shawn and I will pick one hot take segment that we want to pick on, and then we have to explain about it for a minute. All right, cannot be over a minute. All right, so let's get this rolling. Shawn, you go first.
All right. My hot take is if the 76ers traded Ben Simmons for CJ McCollum, the Trailblazers go at least to the Western Conference Finals the following season with him and Damian Lillard and the team that they have. I think, with Ben Simmons, Philly's not the place for him. Damian Lillard, CJ's great for him, but that's not great defensively. With an elite defender like Ben Simmons in the backcourt, and then, Dame can stretch the floor a little bit, I think they will go to at least the Western Conference Finals next season if this trade does go down.
All right. That is definitely an interesting take. That is a unique take. I'm going to give a unique take as well. So my take is this. Players getting injured are actually a good thing for the NBA to have. Why do I say that? It creates unpredictability. With all these players getting injured, now it creates question, creates doubt. Who's going to win the championship? And it just makes it that much harder to predict. And for the people that are crying about, oh, I hate injuries, look, and we've both played sports, we know this. Injuries are part of the game. That's the great thing about the sports. You can't control the predictability factor. So you just got to accept that injuries are part of the game. And you also got to look at it from this perspective. It provides opportunities for underdogs to win. Without these injuries, would the Phoenix Suns even be in position to win the championship? So it just provides an opportunity for a team like that. So I'm appreciative like that. And this also opens up chances for role players to overachieve. Who doesn't like it when they see role players succeed in the playoffs and step up when it is needed? And then you look at rags to riches stories that are more likely to happen when injuries happen. It makes coaching and team building matter that much more. It tests out somebody's depth and stuff like that. It balances out super teams as well. It actually makes teams test out their bench. It actually makes their bench matter instead of just stacking up a starting lineup.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and it's a good point. I like it. I'm just not going to wish injuries on players, but you do definitely bring an interesting take to that.
All right. And that will wrap up the hot take segment. All right. So now we'll be moving on to the next topic. This one will be about the NFL. Obviously, the main storm that is happening is about Aaron Rodgers, the trade reports, the opt-out reports. We got a lot going on with Aaron Rodgers. So for the record, this is the first ever football topic Combo Sports Talk will be discussing about, which is about Aaron Rodgers and his drama with the Packers. Obviously, with the Aaron Rodgers drama, this has to be a discussion with us right now. We both follow the NFL, and we are seeing this Aaron Rodgers drama play out. I want to present you with this topic because according to CBS Sports, the NFL and NFLPA agreed on June 22nd to amend the adjustments to the 2020 collective bargaining agreement made last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Players have until Friday, July 2nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to opt out of the 2021 season by giving written notice to their teams. Aaron Rodgers is unhappy with the Packers, and that is no secret. He could either opt out, retire, continue to hold out, or get traded. However, this topic involving Aaron Rodgers will talk about whether he will get traded or not. If someone says Aaron Rodgers will be traded before the 2021 NFL season starts, then the team that will trade for Aaron Rodgers will be answered. If a trade with Aaron Rodgers does not happen, then the alternative scenario will be answered. So this now leads me to ask this top question. Will Aaron Rodgers remain on the Packers by the start of the 2021 NFL season?
My answer is going to be kind of mixed a little bit. He might be on the roster. I don't think he plays another game for the Green Bay Packers. I think he's played his last game for the Packers. I think they will find a trade partner for him. I don't think he opts out, but I do not think he plays another game on the Packers. In all likelihood, he's probably traded probably preseason time or within the first few weeks, something like that. But by that time, it's also obviously it's Aaron Rodgers, one of the greats. But who wants to trade for a quarterback and break in another quarterback in your system when you've kind of had one going for a few weeks? So for other teams, they might want to make the push now. The Packers are just fine waiting. But I think Aaron Rodgers has played his last game for the Green Bay Packers.
Ooh, this is definitely interesting for sure. Typically players being unhappy, you hear that in the NBA, but not in the NFL. And for the record, Aaron Rodgers is my favorite NFL quarterback. All right. I root for this man. All right. But I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on this one. I do not think that Aaron Rodgers played his last game for the Packers. However, I do think that 2021 will be Aaron Rodgers' final season on the Packers. I think that he will ultimately come back sometime around training camp or preseason. Look, I know that Aaron Rodgers has been holding out and everything like that, but I think Aaron Rodgers has too much love for the game of football to sit out the season. He doesn't really have the leverage to ask for a trade right now. I believe he's got 3 years left on the contract. And the Packers, they're not just going to move him just because he said he wants out. They're just not going to do that. I think he'll ultimately come back and say, you know what, I'll play this out one more year. And then the Packers would then ship him off for whatever they could get.
I see what you're saying and how you're saying Rodgers doesn't really have the leverage, but Rodgers has leverage. I mean, he's one of the great quarterbacks of all time. He's coming off an MVP season. That's like for the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes saying, I'm not going to play this year. They're just not going to let that happen. They're not going to let their MVP player, the Packers, they're not going to let him sit and rot on the bench. They're either going to take his MVP trade value or they're somehow going to work it out. But according to all the reports, their relationship's done. It's it's over.
And I get what the reports are saying. And I definitely see where it's coming from. Where they're saying that it's all done and everything like that. But I don't think that the Packers are going to take advantage of the trade value. That's just not what NFL teams do. Like, they just don't trade away MVP players like that. That it's an unprecedented situation. Look, obviously with the owners and the players, the NFL likes it when the owners are in control, not the players. This is not the NBA, this is the NFL. And I think that Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he does have some leverage. He has more leverage than what most players would have under these circumstances, but he's too good to get traded by the Packers. So and he's not going to opt out of the 2021 NFL season. He's not going to do that. So and the trades, there's really only 3 teams in the running for Aaron Rodgers right now, or should I rather say 4: Broncos, Raiders, Washington, Giants. All right. So let me run down these 4 teams real quick and let me explain why these teams would not necessarily trade for him. So the Broncos, yeah, I know they're interested in him. And yeah, I know that they need a quarterback desperately. But for Aaron Rodgers, I mean, do you really want to go there and want to compete with Patrick Mahomes twice a season? Do you really want to go there? And for the Raiders, it also goes to the same story as well. Do you really want to go against Patrick Mahomes twice a season? Oh, yeah, and don't forget about Justin Herbert as well, an up-and-coming quarterback who I believe will be a future superstar. I don't think Aaron Rodgers wanted to deal with that as well. And so now you're like, okay, so why don't he just request a trade to an NFC East team? Well, you got to remember the Packers are in the NFC. They're not just going to give up Aaron Rodgers to an NFC opponent. Remember what happened with Brett Favre. Brett Favre at the time, I did a little bit of research. He was interested in going to the Vikings. He was interested in going to the Buccaneers. Basically, he lists out all the NFC teams. You know what the Packers did? They traded him to the Jets, an AFC team for less than proper compensation simply because of different opponent in the different conferences is what I'm trying to say. So trading Aaron Rodgers is going to be a lot harder than what it looks like on the surface. And then you also have to ask, what value is it that the Packers are going to be fully happy that they're getting in return? I think they would rather get nothing for Aaron Rodgers and have him never play for another team rather than trade him.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, and I get where you're coming from. But one thing I like to disagree on is when you said about the Broncos and the Raiders and how he wouldn't want to compete against Mahomes and Herbert. Great players compete. Great players love the competition. And also, it's not his choice where he ends up. It's the Packers. They're the ones looking for their best return and their best opportunity. The Packers will trade him wherever they feel they get the best return.
But then I would also ask as well, would the Broncos be willing to give up so much as well? Or would the Raiders be willing to give up so much? Because Aaron Rodgers, great player, but if you get Aaron Rodgers on either of those two teams, they're not guaranteed to make the NFL playoffs. Again, this is not a diss on Aaron Rodgers. This is kind of more of their current team roster construction. Aaron Rodgers wants to go to a win now team. The Broncos and Raiders, although their team is stuck in mediocrity, they're not really teams that I consider to be true win now teams. Somebody like Washington, they're a win now team, but somebody like the Broncos and the Raiders, they're not really a true win now team. But it should be interesting to see how this will play out. I think Aaron Rodgers will ultimately come back, let's say sometime around August, because he'll be like, all right, I'll come back. And yeah, I know the relationship's broken, but I don't think he's going to really be all in on football, is what I'm trying to say. But he'll come back, but he won't have like his mind fully ready.
It's the competition right now with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, and it's whose ego can last longer, because they're both being stubborn, and eventually one of them's going to have to cave in. And it's, like you said, an unprecedented situation, and we'll just have to wait and see who caves first.
I think it'll end up being Aaron Rodgers caves in first, and it'll just ultimately because the players don't have the power that they do in the NBA. And if other players were backing up Aaron Rodgers saying, yeah, it's a good idea from the one out, then yeah, I could totally see him being out. But there's not really a lot of players supporting him. There's not enough. He needs more support if he really wants to get out of Green Bay. He needs more support.
Yeah, and that not only does this affect the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, it'll affect Davante Adams. Is Davante Adams okay that maybe his quarterback is leaving? No, he's not okay with that. And he's in a contract year. It'll be up to him whatever he decides. And does he decide to go back to the Packers if after they see how they've treated Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, this
should
should be interesting to see how this plays out. So you say that he has played his last snap for the Packers. I say that he'll come back one more year, and then they'll ship him off as fast as they can to wherever. All right, so now this will lead us to the final topic of the show. All right, so moving on now to the NBA. This will be about Damian Lillard. I'm going to talk about his trade prediction. You will too, and talk about whether he'll get traded or not. So, as usual, the NBA landscape is always changing. Another day, another superstar unsatisfied with his current team. How many times do we hear this? This time, though, it applies to Damian Lillard with the Trailblazers. Wow, I did not think that I would be saying that statement with Damian Lillard. According to Yahoo Sports, the coaching process and the inability to build a title contending roster are going to possibly push Damian Lillard out of Portland. This was reported by Chris Haynes, who is pretty credible. Look, Damian Lillard has been loyal to the Trailblazers throughout his NBA career. He has done a lot of great things for the franchise. However, they fired Terry Stotts as head coach and replaced him with Chauncey Billups. Damian Lillard played no part in the coaching hire. Also, fans have been attacking Damian Lillard on social media for a pending coaching hire that he played no part in. The unhappiness is starting to gain traction with Damian Lillard. With that being said, that now leads me to ask this topic question. Will Damian Lillard be traded by the Trailblazers now?
I'm going to start off by saying this. I don't think players should be very involved in the coaching hires. I think they should have a say in it. But these front offices know how good these coaches are, probably better than the players would, as long as they aren't in the same system. So Billups from another staff, I think the GMs and stuff, they know how good Billups is because they talk about it. And I'm sure the players do, but these people are players are paid to play, and the front office is paid to make the right hires, get the right players, roster management. And I think you should talk to the players. I don't think the players should be the main focus on who you hire as a coach. But to answer your question, I think Lillard remains a Trailblazer.
All right. So you bring up the point about players not really shouldn't be involved in coaching hires. I agree with you for the most part. However, if you are a superstar like Damian Lillard is, everything that he says you must take into consideration because in the NBA, for the most part, it is all about the superstars. You follow what the superstar tells you, especially a humbled superstar like Damian Lillard. He's not a diva. He's not somebody that just wants out just because he wants out. If he wants out, he does it for a good reason. They fired Terry Stotts, a man that made the NBA playoffs 8 straight seasons, a guy that has continuously developed second rounders into overachievers, Gary Trent Jr. being the most recent example that you would think of. So when you think about it from that perspective, it's frustrating because it's like, do the Trailblazers really care about winning championships, or do they just care about getting along with their guy? Because there seems to be nepotism. And you have to remember with the Trailblazers ownership, there's a lot of confusion going on with them, with the death of Paul Allen a few years back. And their situation is in flux. Their general manager, Neil Oshley, I've been a critic of his, but Terry Stotts, he has continued to elevate them. And Damian Lillard knows that. Yet they hired Chauncey Billups, a first-time NBA head coach. Why couldn't they go out and go get a Mike D'Antoni or something like that? And yeah, I know he's not necessarily going to bring them a championship, but he's going to bring them a better chance to do it than somebody like Chauncey Billups.
Yes, and I know what you're saying. There's, Mike D'Antoni is out there. I also think Mike D'Antoni also kind of left the roster in shambles, or the Rockets roster in shambles, and so I don't know if teams are ready to jump on that yet. I think Billups was in plenty of head coaching talks, and some teams wanted him a lot. The Blazers got him, and I think Billups has been learning, and he's going to be a good coach. I like Billups a lot.
Yeah, he's a player's coach, but when I look at Billups, he seems to be too much of that Jason Kidd type for my liking. And this is not to say that Kidd is a bad coach, but they're not championship caliber coaches. They're not coaches that are going to lead you to championships. They're more like player developers in terms of developing the player's skills at the beginning of their careers. And Damian Lillard, he's not at that stage of his career. So to answer the question, yes, I see Damian Lillard getting traded by the Trailblazers. I don't really see a way around that.
Yep, and so it was almost like how we talked about Coach Bud earlier. You fire Terry Stotts because you want to be better. However, they've been consistent. They've been a good team. They were in the conference finals a few years ago. They can compete, and I think they haven't even been given a great roster. They've been given a superstar player with some good players around him, but I don't think he's been given anything great, and I think that's not on Stotts. I like Stotts as a coach a lot.
Yeah, and Terry Stotts, he needs to get a head coaching job right now. He needs to be hired by somebody. But yeah, back to Damian Lillard. Yeah, so you say that he'll remain a Trailblazer for now, but do you see him being traded at some point during next season?
I do not. I think he remains a Trailblazer. I think he remains a Trailblazer through at least the next contract. I think teams like the Lakers and stuff will make a push for him. But if you're the Trailblazers, it was almost like Aaron Rodgers saying, do you want to give Dame to the Lakers and just have them be better for longer? I don't think you do.
Yeah, but I think that he'll also be traded because he'll demand unhappiness, and the Trailblazers will probably do the right thing and send him off to a team. I do not see the Lakers as a contender for Damian Lillard. They basically have no assets. However, I do see the Clippers as a team that Damian Lillard could be going to. You could swap him PG for Dame or something like that. But more likely, Damian Lillard will probably be traded to an Eastern Conference team. Think Philly. All right, so you pair up Damian Lillard with Joel Embiid, and they got Ben Simmons. So they got matching contracts. So they can send Ben Simmons and picks in return for Damian Lillard.
Yeah, and there's definitely suitors for him. I just think Lillard's upset right now because he's, not playing in the finals. And I think a lot of players are feeling that right now. I think they need to make a big move. I think it's time to break up the Dame CJ duo. I think it's time to break that up. I don't think Dame's the answer. I think you trade CJ away, maybe, like I said, get a Ben Simmons or someone else, because right now their defense isn't really that elite, especially CJ. He's 6'1", 6'2" shooting guard or something like that. He's not the shooting guard you look for in today's NBA. I think you need to trade him, but I think Dame stays a Trailblazer.
And I see where you're coming from. He's got 3 years left on his deal. But I just think that in today's landscape, if you're betting, you never say that the player is staying on one team, even if it is Damian Lillard, because you're just not sure what's going to happen. Because it's basically 29 versus 1. Is he going to be a Trailblazer or is he going to be traded? I'm going to take the field. I think it's just a safer bet. And who's to say that Chauncey Billups won't be the next Steven Silas for the Rockets? You know, the Rockets really bombed this year with Silas. And yeah, I know that the roster is left in shambles, but they should have won more than 16 games this year, whatever they won this year.
See, that's where I disagree with you. I like Steven Silas, and I think a lot of the players like Steven Silas on that roster.
I like Silas as a player's coach, but I'm just talking from a results perspective. And I believe that he will get a lot better, but I'm just pointing out just as like an example. So it could get pretty ugly for the Trailblazers. That's what I'm trying to point out.
Yeah, but I see where you're coming from. I don't think that's what ends up happening. I think Billups ends up being a pretty good coach, and I think not as good as Stotts. I like Stotts. I'm a big fan of Stotts more than most, but I think Billups will be a good coach. And late down the line, we'll probably have a segment about who our favorite coaches are about among the new hires, which we're still waiting on to complete. But I like Billups up there, and Lillard and Billups. I think they'll do some good things together, and I think Lillard will like Billups and he'll stay.
I just think that it was kind of an odd fit with Billups and the Trailblazers. Like if Billups got hired by another NBA team or something like that, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, but I just think that for this team, it just makes little sense.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying. I mean, I think you make a good point there. I just think we haven't really seen Billups as a head coach yet. And there's risk to that, but there's also high reward to that because we know how Billups is viewed around the league. And I think he's viewed as, next good head coach.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from as well. All right, so like I said, I see Damian Lillard being traded by the start of the next season. And besides, in my opinion, the Trailblazers need to be rebuilding anyways. This is not a championship level team. I do not see how it will become a championship level team, at least with this current roster. I mean, maybe they could trade CJ McCollum for whatever they could get, but I just do not see them as a championship team no matter what. So I say they need to blow it up and start the rebuild.
Yep, and I say keep Dame, move CJ, build it up. You have good pieces. Compete for a championship.
Yep, and I see where you're coming from as well. So that will now wrap up the Damian Lillard segment. All right, so for the viewers out there, I'm going to talk to you guys. So thank you for watching episode 1 of Combo Sports Talk. I really hope that you guys enjoyed the topics that were presented. Let us know down in the comment section below on what you guys thought about this podcast that was done. Obviously, the NBA playoffs are going on, so that will be the main parts of Combo Sports Talk right now. Shawn, what would you like to add to what I just said?
I mean, not too much. Just we're for sure get some more NFL topics in the future, but right now it's the NBA, all about the NBA. NBA playoffs, NBA finals, and then the NBA draft will follow with that. But for sure, as more NFL news comes out, we will be bringing you the NFL news to discuss. But like I said, like you said, Combo Sports Talk, next big thing. We're on the rise. We're here to bring it to you. I'm excited.
Oh, yeah. And also, do not forget, we also talk about college football and college basketball on this podcast as well. So make sure you guys note that as well. Again, thanks for watching this podcast. We will be back here next week with new topics to present to you guys. Enjoy it.